extracellular matrix, this solid matrix, is called the lamella. And they thought it was just all these calcium phosphates and some collagen making it hard. But what they found in the last couple of years is that there are these tubes there with collagen, and inside there's gel. And so that helps give our bones a little bit more flexibility than we thought. We'll see how in young children, their bones are a little more flexible. As we become adults, they become a little bit more brittle. But we still have this gel-like structure we didn't know was there. Okay, next. That central portion in the osteon that has the blood vessels and nerves going through it is called your central canal. That's in the middle. And what happens is then you'll have forming around the central canal, when you build bone, you'll have these layers. So you have these central canals running up and down. You also have blood vessels that go and connect the central canals together. So those would be the Volkmann's canals. So they make sure that we get blood all the way through. Now let's look at a single osteon more in depth. So the background, the extracellular matrix, is the lamella. This whole tree trunk functional unit is the osteon. Central canal in the center with our blood vessels. And then around the outside, you've got these dark holes, these spaces. The spaces are called the lacuna. That's the structure there. And the cells inside there are called osteocytes. When they were on the outside, when they were on the periosteum and still building bone, they were called osteoblasts. But then they got trapped, and now they just maintain matrix. So they're called osteocytes. And then you've got these hair-like structures, the canaliculi. So coming out of each lacuna, you've got these little stripes. Those are these little canals that lead from the central canal out to make sure the osteon gets its blood that it needs. So here's a nice view showing the osteon, the central canal, and those lacuna with osteocytes inside. A reminder of the types of cells we'll see here. First, you've got osteoblasts. Osteoblasts build bone. Blasts build matrix. Cytes maintain. So those are the mature blasts that have been trapped, they just maintain. Osteoclasts are actually derivatives of our white blood cells, and they break bone down. So anytime we have low calcium levels, we need to break bone down. Osteoclasts are alerted, they start breaking it down. It's also important for us to constantly be regenerating, breaking down, and making new bone so that we can keep it fresh and not brittle. Osteoclasts are important there. And then you might see the word osteoid. When we form bone before it ossifies and gets hard, it's called osteoid before it becomes the lamella. So most of bone's mass is these hard mineral salts that make up the lamella. The calcium phosphates make it really hard. And here's citrate. That's the discovery I was talking about where they found the goo, the gel inside of the collagen tubes so that they could have a little more flexibility. Okay. So now we're going to look at the different ways that we make bone through osteogenesis or ossification, the making of bone tissue. And we'll look at it when we make it as embryos, as it grows into adulthood. And then once we're adults, we'll look at how we constantly remodel, build up, and break down, and repair bone. So first, formation in the embryo. Begins about 2 months in, and bones form in one of two ways: intramembranous ossification or endochondral ossification. Based on the name, you should have an okay idea of what's happening. Intramembranous means within a membrane. So you'll have these layers of fibrous membrane where bone tissue starts to occur. Endochondral, within chond is cartilage, chondrocytes, remember that? Endochondral is in cartilage. So basically we make these little hyaline cartilage versions of our bones, and those slowly get ossified until we have our fully developed bones. Intramembranous makes most of our flat bones like our skull and the clavicles, your collarbones. So here's a picture of cells inside the membranous sheets. All the cells that make up connective tissues come from what are called these mesenchyme cells, and then they start to differentiate. they start to ossify, you'll see this osteoid, the unhardened matrix, occur before it becomes the lamella. There's osteoblasts building up our bone. And then they start to have this calcified background occurring. It starts to get hard. And any osteoblasts that get trapped while we make it become osteocytes, and the space they're trapped in is the lacuna. Then we have what's called a woven bone forming, so that looks a lot like the spongy bone, and that's what it's going to become next. So then you'll have this spongy bone, the diploe, and then on the outside you'll have these osteoblasts building bone, and we'll have some contact bone there. So I would pause and go through the steps of intramembranous ossification. The other way that most of our bones are made is endochondral, from these hyaline cartilage versions. And so we'll look at how hyaline cartilage slowly gets replaced. So you start out with hyaline cartilage, you have this bone collar occur, and then you start having bone form. It forms from the middle out. And so then once it's fully ossified, you've got this lovely remaining portion from the hyaline cartilage. You've got the articular cartilage lining our joints, and then you've got the epiphyseal plate. So those are both remnants from this growth that occurred earlier. And the reason that we do this is because it's much easier to grow cartilage, as I said before. So by making cartilage first and then just replacing it with bone, we can grow larger faster. Next, we've made our bones, and now we're just growing in length and remodeling. So growing in length, that just occurs at the epiphyseal plate. The cartilage cells there divide, and as they divide, they spread out, and they get replaced with bone tissue. And then remodeling, we're breaking down bone, resorbing it, and building it back up by growth from our osteoblasts. So osteoclasts come by, break it down, osteoblasts build it back up, and we've got some fresh bone there. Here's a picture showing the bones that have started to ossify, but you can still see there's portions that are invisible. Those are still hyaline cartilage. And then intramembranous, you'll have these soft membranous tissue areas, your fontanelles, your soft spots. And those will make it easier for childbirth, for the head to fit through, and then also because it's more flexible, it allows our brain to grow much more quickly. So how do we regulate this growth? How are the osteoclasts and blasts told to get started? Well, it's going to be through hormonal regulation. So during infancy, when you're young, that epiphyseal plate activity, the cartilage dividing there, stimulated by growth hormone. And then during puberty, you'll have these sex hormones, testosterones, estrogens, and they'll cause this growth to occur more rapidly. You'll have masculinization and feminization of features, especially the pelvis. You'll see this change in angles there, we'll look at. And then it's going to tell your epiphyseal plates to ossify and become epiphyseal lines. So here's female and there's male. Females, you can see, have a much wider arch here. Males are much smaller, and they have a larger hole area to fit offspring through. Okay. So now let's look at remodeling a little more in depth, where osteoblasts build bone and the osteoclasts break it down. Why would we want to do that? We want to replace old bone, and then we'd also want to put it down where we need more strength. So as long as you have all the building blocks, lots of calcium, phosphorus, you're ready to go. And then if we ever need any of these building blocks to do other things, we can break bone down. That's going to be especially important for calcium. And we talked about this briefly before, but calcium is really important for homeostasis. It's important for muscle contraction. It removes the block on your contractile proteins, so we can contract. Without it, no contraction. It helps our neurons have their resting membrane potential so that we can properly send these electrical impulses. It's important for clotting, secretions, and cell division. So we definitely need to make sure we have enough to do all those processes. So the two control loops that you have, one's going to be hormones for calcium, and then another's going to be these mechanical forces. So Wolff's Law is basically that the thicker the bone is in an area has to do with how much stress it's under, how strong it needs to be. So if we do more weightlifting, we put more pressure on a bone, the osteoblasts are going to build up bone there. So that's why women with osteoporosis are recommended to do these weight-bearing exercises. And then you can see that where bones are most likely to buckle or break, they're the thickest. Okay. So what happens when they break? It's called a fracture. You can either have compound, where the bone comes out of the skin and you can see it, or simple closed, where it doesn't. Which one of those you have is going to be important for doctors and their ideas of how to set it back up. Any book that you look at is going to have different types of common fractures, but some of them will be the same. Comminuted, multiple fragments of bone, 3 or more pieces. Compression, the bone is crushed. So like here you've got vertebrae, very often occurs in osteoporosis, and they just get crushed there. Spiral occurs when you have a twisting motion. Epiphysis occurs when the epiphysis and diaphysis are broken apart from each other. So that'll usually happen along the epiphyseal plate before ossification occurs and it becomes the epiphyseal line. Depressed, it's pushed inwards. In green stick, that's where only part of the bone breaks. So that's more common in children. When they have these more flexible bones, part of it can break when the other part doesn't. Okay. So what do you do if our bone has been fractured? First, you're going to damage all the blood vessels there. So then those broken blood vessels are going to have a hematoma forming, this clot of blood. It's going to be swollen, painful, infected. We're going to get white blood cells in there to help take away any debris and perform immune response. Then that gets turned into fibrocartilage. This fibrocartilage callus or soft callus occurs as those white blood cells start eating and breaking down any debris. Then you've got what's called a bony callus. So this is kind of like the woven bone that we saw in intramembranous ossification. And then basically, after that point, you're just remodeling. You're having everything match up, fitting it all back down properly. Now let's look at a couple of homeostatic imbalances. Osteomalacia, that's soft, weakened bones in adults. So if there isn't enough calcium or vitamin D, vitamin D is important. It allows us to absorb calcium from our diet. Otherwise, it just goes right through us. You're not getting enough calcium to the bones. They're soft. So there you can see these bones have reduced calcium levels. Rickets is a lot like the last one, osteomalacia, except this is in children. So when they're not getting enough calcium or vitamin D, their bones are still forming, but they're soft, so as they grow, they can kind of get bent. You'll see these deformities occurring. It generally happens in areas where children don't get proper nutrients. They saw the oldest case of rickets ever recently in Scotland, 3,000 years ago, the skeleton is from. And what they think is that based on the area, they should have had enough calcium. And so they think this person was either really sick or a slave and they never saw light, because you need light to make vitamin D. And then you need vitamin D to absorb calcium. So if you don't get any light, no calcium. And then we've got osteoporosis. So that's this group of diseases where your osteoblasts are building bone up slower than the osteoclasts are taking it down. So you're breaking it down faster than you can build it back up. So the bone will get thinner and more fragile, and then very little movements can cause things to break. And there you can see examples of vertebrae that have been crushed. This is more common in females going through menopause and later because they have less estrogen present to help keep building bone. Males, their testosterone doesn't really drop to very low levels. They continue to stay high, they continue to be able to produce offspring, whereas females, when we hit menopause, our estrogen levels drop, our ability to put down bone is decreased. So what can we do? Well, first we can get them more calcium and vitamin D to absorb that calcium. They can do weight-bearing exercises to help put more stress on the bones to help build it up. You can give them hormone therapy, or you can help try to increase their mineral density. Okay, and that was a breeze through Chapter 6, Bones. I hope you learned. If not, go back through, watch again, pause, watch other YouTube videos. Best of luck.